When we return to our planet, the High Court may well sentence you to torture.
He likes movies, we like movies. SeptumSin versus the world. SeptumSin versus the world. SeptumSin versus the world. SeptumSin versus the world.
I'd buy that for $1.
Hello, and welcome to another of those Vlogcasts. Sit
Indeed.
back, take off those shoes, put on your slippers, put your feet up, and listen and enjoy. Get your nice copy of whatever thing you like to watch, be it artistic pictures to porno, whatever it is. Well, probably not the porno. Well, in any case, check it out.
Not
and,
if you're at work.
Check this out and listen to our discussion on the things video and not video. So this time we've got some stuff going on, but of course, before we get too far on, just a couple things of note this week. If you haven't caught it, Let the Right One In is going to be the discussion for Movies Galore on Tuesday.
Yep.
So
I'll be
if
running
you,
that one.
So if you haven't watched it, do that. And of course, upcoming for this upcoming Tuesday is going to be another one that you're running, which is Raising Arizona. So some interesting discussions.
Yes, a couple of very interesting discussions about very interesting and different films.
What? They're not the same film?
No, not at all.
But other than that, we do have the Oscar Vlogcast, which is an hour long, so you're getting double the Vlogcast for less than half the price.
Woohoo!
You just gotta listen. We talk about our nominees, those who we believe are going to be winning this year. Of course, you can join us. We are discussing possibly a live stream on Oscar night, but don't hold us to that. And we are going to be, of course, discussing it the following day, discussing the winners and comparing them to our notes.
Yes.
All right. Well, go ahead and let us know what have you been checking out this week.
Well, as far as, we'll start with the ongoing and started stuff, of course. So, I should say ongoing because I haven't really started anything particularly. I've been reading a fair bit of One Piece. I'm working on the Water 7 story arc, so I've gotten to Frankie's introduction. That's kind of fun. And I've been watching a little bit more CSI and a little bit more Gravity Falls, so we got a little bit of ongoing with those.
Gravity Falls is fun.
Oh, it is indeed. And then just to touch on what you were just talking about with Inside Movies Galore, it's been a couple minutes since we did one of these vlogcasts. So in the meantime, I have actually watched 3 weeks worth of films. So a couple weeks ago, we covered 1985's Legend, Ridley Scott film. And I watched both the regular and director's cut in preparation for that. Last week, we did a discussion on the wonderful Rob Reiner film, The Princess Bride, one of the all-time greats. I rewatched that along with the commentary track with Rob Reiner doing the commentary. And this week, we will be doing, as he just said, Let the Right One In. So I watched that the other night.
See, I haven't watched any of the stuff coming up for that. I've been doing some gaming. I've been playing Sims 4, which is nice. I'm working on it slowly but surely. I've got a cat, and I've adopted a cat, so in real life and in The Sims. Of course, my playthrough for Dragon Quest, I'm still on Dragon Quest 2, and I've gotten next to nowhere. But I am still doing it, like a minute or two at a time. And Resident Evil 2, which we haven't played for a while, so that's one that is oddly on the list, but is there. And, of course, my work on the Kingdom Hearts playthrough, still on Kingdom Hearts 1. Though I have started 2 things, one of which is I've been starting my rewatch of Star vs. the Forces of Evil. I'm prepping for the March release of season 4. I need to start my Marvel watch because before we know it,
To prep for Captain
Marvel is going to be on us, and then the next Infinity War.
Right.
But this one I'm already halfway through season 2.
Oh.
So I've only got 1.5 seasons left, and then I'm caught up with Star vs. the Forces of Evil.
I wonder if I should redo all my Marvel.
I'm of course continuing to read K-On!, which still working on that one. Still working on the same volume that I was beforehand, reading a few pages here and there.
Mm-hmm.
And then one that I've started that's of significance is Tatami Galaxy.
Cool.
That one is a rough one to get through. You have to be paying attention. Tatami Galaxy is about an individual who is living in this apartment, and he is taking different classes, and it goes backwards every episode, basically saying, I joined this club. Then it goes back there, it's like, instead of joining that club, he joined this club. And every single time he makes this terrible friend and ends up running into this girl who he is trying to get with. Now, there are some loose connections to Night a Short Walk On Girl. There are some recurrent characters like the god of matchmaking and a few of the drinking people in it, though it's not directly connected.
Yeah.
How
similar is it in terms of art style and that sort of thing?
Very similar in art style. Not quite as high a production, but you would expect that from what you're getting.
Mm-hmm.
As far as wordiness, it's right up there with Zetsubo Sensei.
Oh, okay.
Matter of fact, it shares more similarities to me with Zetsubo Sensei than it does Night a Short Walk On Girl.
Ah.
So, and for those of you who are at home, you probably don't know that much about that, but hopefully one day.
Yes. Maybe one day we'll get to Tatami Galaxy and Zetsubo Sensei properly released here.
So
won't that be nice?
I'm sure you've had much more you've watched that I have not watched.
Quite a bit. I've quite a bit watched. A couple of the ones I've watched in the last couple weeks are films from last year that were not in any way, shape, or form part of the Oscar conversation. But they were fun films. They were worth watching. One that I very much enjoyed was a film by Armando Iannucci, the guy who got an Oscar nod for In the Loop. And I think he is a producer or creator or something for the show Veep. And he did a weird satire film called The Death of Stalin, which features a very fascinating cast. Steve Buscemi, Jason Isaac, and a whole bunch of other people. And it takes place in Russia or the Soviet Union or what have you, on the eve of Stalin's death and thereafter. It does have the uncomfortable issue of one of the co-stars is played by Jeffrey Tambor, and of course he is one of the people who has kind of become persona non grata lately. He does play a spineless weakling in the film, which is kind of fun. Buscemi plays a young Khrushchev, and it was a great role for him. He did a really good job. It's a very darkly funny film. It is very dark. But a lot of gallows humor, literally in some cases. Like when Stalin gets a stroke, they're all standing around waiting for the rest of the cabinet to show up because they need a quorum to decide if they need to call a doctor. And it's just... It's like, that's just one example. It was just and Jason Isaacs plays a field marshal who's completely bloodthirsty, and he's actually hilarious. It's worth watching, definitely.
Well, I've got one that I know. These next two are actually, of course, I watched Legend as well, but I watched the director's cut, which is funny because the last Vlogcast I had watched the theatrical cut, so it's kind of funny in that way.
Right.
Speaking of ones that we both have watched this time, we both watched Christopher Robin.
Yep.
And I watched it paired with another movie, but I'm going to bring that up in a moment. But again, I thought Christopher Robin was quite good. I thought it was fun. I didn't think it was the best film, I mean, it was just, it was a simple, tried and true story. Nothing new, but still, it is fun, it is whimsical, and that's all you need sometimes.
Well, you might as well mention the other one, because my commentary involves both of them.
Well, okay, Goodbye, Christopher Robin, which
Right.
is a very different tale altogether.
Right, yes.
Which is the more realistic tale about the real-life Christopher Robin. And it is not whimsical, it is not light and happy. It is very dark.
It does have some whimsy.
It does
but...
have some, but nowhere near.
Right.
And it's much better written and very well acted. It is a good film, but it is a hard film to watch.
Yeah.
I'm kind of glad I had Christopher Robin to balance it out in the end. I'm glad I chose Christopher Robin as the afterwards, which is fine because Christopher Robin has a grown-up Christopher Robin in it, so it kind of works well.
So the original one was, I believe it was Domhnall Gleeson, who plays A.A. Milne, the author of the Winnie the Pooh stories, and Christopher Robin was his child. And the film features Margot Robbie as the mother, and she is kind of a cold bitch in that film.
She is.
But it's really good, but it is, like you said, much darker.
Oh, yeah.
But the thing is, the other one is more Disney-fied. It is more Disney. And one of the highlights of the film of Christopher Robin is seeing these characters. I think they were very well written.
Yeah.
Like, Pooh has some great one-liners. He really does. He has some great one-liners. Some of the others, too. Tigger always has some fun things to say. It was well done, and the film is up for visual effects, and it did deserve the praise for the visual effects, I think. But the one thing that bugged me about it, which actually makes it difficult to watch it with Goodbye, Christopher Robin, I imagine. It was hard enough for me to think about Goodbye, Christopher Robin, is that the real-life Christopher Robin did not like being associated with those books and tried very hard to distance himself in later life. And I couldn't help thinking, he probably wouldn't like to know that this film exists.
Probably
I could
not.
be wrong. I mean, Ewan McGregor does a great job playing the older Christopher Robin. He does do a great job playing him. But it just, it's kind of...
It almost felt like a cash grab, though.
It really almost did. I mean, it's Disney.
Actually, why don't you cover this one, because that's also one that we share?
Well, I could. I was going to come to it later, but do you want me to go ahead and hit it now?
Yeah, let's go ahead. That way we've got the ones we both hit
Well, while we're
together.
talking about Oscar nominations, Oscar nominees, we did both cover Bohemian Rhapsody this week, and I'll let you do the most of it because I know you have a lot more to say than I do. But I will say this. This was a film that had a very, 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 very troubled production schedule. They ended up firing the director with roughly 2 weeks left of principal photography. The director also was a very controversial. Bryan Singer has had a lot of controversy. They had to recast. He wasn't the first director. Rami Malek was not the first Freddie Mercury. Sacha Baron Cohen was going to be Freddie Mercury.
Very interesting difference there.
Yes, and he parted ways because he and Brian May could not see eye to eye. Brian May and it's Roger... You should know them.
I should.
They were very actively involved in the film and actually show up in a cameo at the end. The third surviving member, John Deacon didn't. He had no involvement with the film. Basically, it's wonderful music. This is a wonderful argument for
Taylor.
best. Yeah, Roger Taylor.
I thought of it before it even came up.
This is a wonderful argument for best use of music in film. It really is. They did a phenomenal job with the soundtrack. Rami Malek does do a great job with Freddie Mercury. One thing I do want to mention, one of my favorite moments in the film was a weird little meta moment they had. One cameo they had, an early producer is played by Mike Myers. He's almost unrecognizable under the makeup and everything. And they're having an argument with him about Bohemian Rhapsody. And if you saw the trailer, you got that great one-liner of something like, "I pity your wife if you think 6 minutes is too long." But there's the part where he's like, "You will never have teenagers banging their heads in the car to this song." And just the fact that Mike Myers delivered that line when he and Dana Carvey as Wayne and Garth did exactly that and introduced the entire 90s to that song. I just love that little meta thing they did there.
See, I probably had a slightly different reaction to the movie than you did when you watched it.
Right.
Queen has had a special place for me for a while. When I was an infant, my father would play the live concert, the 70-something live concert.
The Live Aid?
No, not Live Aid. It was Rock's Fly. No, I can't think of the name of it right off the top of my head. It was one of their main live concerts that they performed.
I think I know which one you're talking about.
Live Killers or something like that. Something like that. It was all
Hello,
about Killer
dude.
Queen. Hey, we got a kitten up here. Hello, little kitten.
For like 10 seconds.
Yeah, well, that's how kittens are. Here today, gone in a couple seconds.
Yes.
But he played that when I was just a baby. And again, I got into the band a lot more when I was in high school. And really loved it. There was a Night at the Opera was the first album I fully listened to over and over again. And my favorite one on there was not Bohemian Rhapsody. It was the Prophet song, which is a really long one, but it has such an amazing feel. Yeah, it's a long song. But when I heard this was coming out, I was very excited, and I was dreading it at the same time. And then when it was released, I didn't go to see it in theaters because I heard, well, there were a lot of inconsistencies, and they tried to dramatize it, and they overplayed things. And I'm like, so I decided not to see it. But then all the positive buzz that came out of this and the award wins drove me to finally say, and the Oscar nominations, drove me to say, okay, I'm going to finally watch this. And I did. And I liked it. I think if I hadn't have known about the stuff before I went to it, I would have been bothered. There were things out of place, like when they were talking about doing the disco album, which I did find was entertaining, because that's exactly what I thought when I first heard it. Why the heck would you release disco when they are burning disco records? But again, they kind of put that one out of order for the release. A couple of songs were on the wrong albums in their release. And some of their stories about people, about the breakups and about the solo careers. I mean, Brian May released 2 solo albums. Roger Taylor was in formed his own band.
Wasn't he the first one that went solo out of the group?
Yeah, I think he was the first one, and he formed a band called Cross. Yeah. And again, those two, Brian May and Roger Taylor, were very much, and this is our way or nothing. And so there's a lot to be said. I think they really worked on villainizing Freddie Mercury more in the situation when it was more of a mutual villainization of the group. They fought like cats and dogs. They did not get along very well together.
Although I did like one part in the film where Mercury comes back, basically tail between the legs, like very penitent, and he said that, I went and made these albums, and they gave me all these people and let me do everything I wanted to do, but I got to do everything I wanted to do. And it was kind of like he was saying, like, he appreciated the pushback after when he realized what the difference was,
But again, it was a good thing, and of course the diagnosis kind of of his HIV was kind of put out for drama value. It's more likely it happened around 86-ish that he found out. But again, hardworking individual, loved it, loved the fact that they were using it, and they had a lot of things and several songs that you don't normally hear in the catalog, which I was very appreciative of. Love it. And I'm going to stop talking about this now because we need to move on.
Yeah, we might as well move on to the next. My other one, which actually I watched the same day, so I guess this is a good segue, was decidedly not an Oscar-nominated film. I got a copy from the library of The Spy Who Dumped Me, and so I watched that one. Action comedy from the late summer with Mila Kunis, Kate McKinnon, Justin Theroux, a couple other people. It was a fun movie. It was relatively forgettable, just kind of the girls thrown into kind of these two average white girls just thrown into a spy situation, sort of like your average Hitchcock plot, but with more of a modern bent to it. And I will say it was not a bad movie. It was not a great movie. Kate McKinnon overacted like nobody's business. She is pretty funny. She can be hilarious at times. But this is a good example we were just talking about. When someone's allowed to be excessive, they sometimes are excessive. But I will say, and I will maintain this, when we did our top 15 people who were overlooked, you brought up Kate Hudson. She's a good example of this. Yeah. Anna Faris is a good example. There are some people who are very, very talented, but are not getting the roles they need to show off their talent. And I will maintain Mila Kunis is one of these people. She is extremely talented. She always acts above and beyond the movies she's in. She needs to start getting great films. She really does. I think Black Swan is the one prestige film she's gotten to do. She really needs more prestigious films to work in. She was great in this film, but she was above the material. So maybe one day. Yeah.
All right. So, of course, I watched a couple films with my wife, and one of them was an interesting film called Stand By for Further Instructions. It was on Netflix. It is a horror film, but it makes a lot of interesting and complex statements. The film is set in just a typical home where a family is getting together for Christmas, and they don't get along so well, family-wise, as many families don't. But suddenly they wake up and they're sealed in their house. And the only thing is on the TV is this little prompt saying, "Stand by for further instructions." And it gives them these weird instructions to do things like wash yourself with bleach. Tells them to inject random stuff in just to see what it goes. So, and the family was named after one of the families from the psychological experiment. I can't think of the name, but it was the experiment where they had people line up. They had one person on one side of the mirror, one side on the other side, and they were supposed to give them tests, and every wrong answer, they're supposed to electrocute them a little bit, and they kept upping the voltage just to see how far somebody would go. And,
I know this.
Eventually, people would even go as far as continuing to electrocute people after they appeared to pass out. And this is one of the great unethical experiments because, of course, what they didn't know is that the people being electrocuted weren't being electrocuted at all. They were just acting. So these people were thinking they killed it. But this was to show a lot of times when people say, Hitler's purges could never have happened here. We would never do that sort of thing. No, it could easily happen here. And that's one of the things there. And it also dictates our reliance on electronics. As, of course, we're looking at a computer screen and looking at a phone while we're talking about this.
Oh, man, it's going to drive me nuts now. I know which experiment you're talking about because I saw the movie. No. But
you saw that movie?
When you first mentioned that, though, I was thinking, so this is like a forced escape room sort of situation? It's like, I don't know, maybe. Anyway, so my next one, very, very, very different film. Technically, I'm going to go ahead and say this is the first feature film I have seen from 2019. And it's a very, very good film that some people didn't care for it terribly, but A lot of people loved it, and I'm one of them because I like a good tearjerker anime. I went to see the film that has the very memorable English title, I Want to Eat Your Pancreas, which is based on a novel by the same name.
I've heard that's a tearjerker.
There apparently is a live-action Korean film, I believe, based on the same story. Basically, the gist of it is you have this very, very, very reticent dude who believes that nobody cares about him. Nobody at all. And he has decided he doesn't give a damn. So he basically does everything he can to avoid interpersonal contacts. He just goes through life like, whatever. And one day at the hospital, he finds a diary, which is, I think it was titled, or the translation that I saw, the book was called Living with Dying. And this young lady comes up to him and says, "That's my book." He picked it up because he's a bookworm, and he sees a book, he has to read it. And it turns out she's this girl in his class. Her name is Sakura. He is not, you find out his name late in the film. And that's all I'm going to say on that because it's important. But her name is Sakura. And she, it turns out, has an unspecified terminal disease of the pancreas. And you actually learn the significance of the title very early on in the film. One, it starts with her funeral. So this is kind of like Grave of the Fireflies, where you know from the get-go that there will be no... Well, in this one there are
no survivors.
In this one there are survivors, but you know what I mean. Like
the pancreas explodes, killing all of them.
Anyway, it starts with her funeral, and everyone is there. Her family, her classmates, everyone. He is not. He's at home crying himself, And he looks at his phone and he says that the last text he ever sent her was, "I want to eat your pancreas." And he doesn't know she ever got it. And you find out shortly after that, she had brought up the idea that some people believe that you can cure illness by eating the infected organ. So that it becomes kind of like a almost a running joke between them, if you will. Basically, she decides that this guy needs to open up. So she decides to spend her last months on Earth being his friend. And she is his complete polar opposite. And of course, he slowly starts to warm up and learn, to be a friend, to want a friend. And it really is a very interesting film. It's gorgeously done. It's beautiful animation, beautiful music, all this stuff. One of the biggest critiques of the film, which I agree with, is they really skimped on the character animation, the facial expressions, the movement. Like when I saw A Silent Voice, that was KyoAni. KyoAni is famous for really animating their characters. You watch K-On!, you watch A Silent Voice, you watch Full Metal Panic, you get tons of movement, This one, not so much. And when you have a character who's super taciturn to begin with, that was a valid critique a lot of people had. But other than that, it is a film that is really good. It's worth watching. If you like tearjerkers, or if you just like good anime, it's worth watching. And I'm looking forward to it getting released so I can see it again. And
I've heard that the manga is really good.
Yeah, well... Was there a manga that one?
Either manga
well, like I said, it's based on a
novel. And there was a manga because I did I saw a review of it.
Okay.
So it looks interesting. Speaking of anime and a slightly different tone, I finished A Lull in the Sea.
Oh, very good.
I'm not going to go over it too much. You covered it a lot when you finished it, since you finished it first.
That one had some pretty good teary moments, too.
It did. Yeah. Of course, a lot of it has to do with those love triangles. Mm-hmm. It was a lot of unrequited love, and a lot of just back and forth. And the story could get even confusing at times. Mm-hmm. But The only thing that struck me about this is it started heavy. I feel like it should have started lighter. That's probably my only regret. I thought it was a good series. I don't regret seeing it. But I do feel like if it started a little bit lighter, gave us a little bit better, maybe given us 2 episodes more, to where it was like, you know, you get to know them, you get to understand all the people, you get to see the dynamics more, then introduce the other guy. Then I think that series would do well. I mean, for those who haven't, it's a simple kind of fantasy story based off of the whole, like, shrouded, what was it? What do they call that? That's the Japanese folk tale about the person that comes up from the sea. She has, like, a magic robe on, and
I'm not
the
sure,
guy
but
marries them and takes the robe. She could never return to the sea.
Well, I don't know about the Japanese version, but that sounds a lot like the Tales of the Selkies and things like that.
But I know there's a Japanese tale similar to that, and they use it in several of their anime. So I know that's probably partially where the basis is. But so you've got the underwater people and the above people living on dry land, and there's sort of a tension between the two. And this kind of builds. There's an end of the world mechanic. This whole thought of growing old or dying. It's very complex, very, very heavy. But still, it was an enjoyable series. I think it was worth watching. Again, if you catch it and you get hit with the gut punch that is the opener, the opening episode, stick with it. You'll be thankful for it.
Right. All right. So, my next thing is a big thing. And actually, it's most of what I have left. And that is that this past weekend, I had what may well be my single longest stretch spent at the movies in a given day. We had the Environmental Film Festival not this weekend, but the previous weekend. And that was very interesting. We had Environmental Film Festival. It was actually a long, kind of over the course of 2 weeks, multiple events. But the centerpiece of it was for 3 days, particularly the Saturday and Sunday, our local historical theater did a lot of screenings of environmentally themed films. And I went to Saturday's program, and they actually did their regularly scheduled programming afterwards. So I was there from 10 in the morning until just after midnight. So with a short break to go get dinner. So I will go ahead and cover the environmental portion, and then after he does some more stuff, I'll come back and do the rest. So it started in the morning with Disney Nature's Born in China, which Disney Nature does some pretty good documentaries, environmental documentaries. They do play up the human aspect, if you will, of a lot of creatures. I thought the narration was a little too cutesy and kid-oriented, but the photography was gorgeous. They did some really good work with the photography. They followed several different species, of course pandas, of course. They also included red pandas, but didn't spend a lot of time on them. Cranes, there were some snow leopards, some monkeys, I can't remember, some sort of snub-nosed monkey, I can't remember the name of it. And basically they looked at families, like young, like the snow leopard has 2 little kittens, and you see basically through the course of a year, like a lot of these documentaries will do, but since it was called Born in China, they focused on the young, it was a really good little movie, it was a lot of fun. Next up we had Birders, the Central Park Effect. One thing that you may not know if you're not a bird nut, and even if you are a bird nut, you might not know this, the east coast of the U.S. is a major migration pathway for birds. And there are areas where you don't get a lot of green space. So Central Park is actually a magnet for migratory birds. And it's apparently one of the best birding places in the East. So they did a documentary about that and followed a whole bunch of birders, again, basically a season. And it was really interesting. You got to see a lot of really cool birds and learned a lot about some of them. You learned a lot about birding. And I've always kind of flirted with that hobby. I kind of want to get into it. Then we had Edward Clark Jr. was actually present to introduce, he is the president and co-founder of the Wildlife Center of Virginia, and he was present to introduce Untamed Episode 1, which focused on black bears. Untamed is a series that's going to be airing starting in May, I believe it was, May or June, and so we got to see what was supposedly the first ever screening of the first episode, which is really cool. And it was they basically take in injured and abandoned wildlife and get them back on track to get re-released, and it was a very interesting and informative episode, and I recommend checking out the series when it comes out. Then we had The River's Last Chance, which was a documentary about the Eel River in California. Very depressing to an environmentalist to watch that film. But also, if you're at all interested in the socioeconomic history of California, it'll depress you if you have any humanity in you. But it was really good. It was really well done, and it does show that things might be changing a little bit for the better. Living the Change, Inspiring Stories for a Sustainable Future, was a decent documentary that was more about kind of the first part talked about a lot of the problems facing the world, and then they interviewed a lot of people who are supposedly giving the solutions, and it was mostly centered on New Zealand, but there's a lot of very interesting stuff going on there. Straws was a short film about straws. And it was a very disturbing documentary. Very disturbing. Don't use plastic straws. That's what it comes down to. Don't use plastic straws.
See, there's so many people making fun of that.
Yeah.
And especially on specific sites like,
yeah,
oh, well, yeah, all the liberals with their straws, but the straws do a lot of damage to the environment. Yes, there are a lot of other things you could try and work on, but this is not something that...
I mean, they did, for example, there was one restaurant they talked to where they made the switch from plastic to paper straws, and they said that it did not impact their business at all. They were saving money because when they only did straws on demand, they weren't wasting so much money on straws. And I worked in a restaurant. They waste a lot of money on straws.
Oh, yeah.
There's a very strong economic argument here, people. And then the next one, the last one they did, speaking of economic arguments, The Devil We Know. This was a hard film to watch. It was a documentary from last year. It was really hard to watch. It was all about DuPont Chemical Company and their use of a chemical known as C8, and they which is an active ingredient in Teflon, Gore-Tex, and a whole bunch of other things that people love. And oh my god, this movie pissed me off on so many levels, as it would you, especially if you live in the Ohio River Basin. And, someone else reminded me afterwards that the guy in Foxcatcher is one of the CEOs or the CEO of this. And I was going, that makes so much sense on so many levels. You watch this film, you will wish that you never had to do business with this company again. It's so, oh man. So, it was every bit as polemical as Fahrenheit 11/9, but So that's what I saw that day with the environmental festival. Like I said, it was a busy day.
I only have 2 more things on my list. I'm going to do one.
Okay.
Darken. by John Johnson. Of course, I had an infamous kind of run-in with him because of the whole whole Skeleton Key movie series. He also did a Plan 9 remake, and it was all right. And it wasn't just as... there's nothing that can quite sum up the chaos and madness of the Skeleton Key series. You just have to watch my reviews. They're pretty early on. Right. And from what I've heard from him, there are very few people who have reviewed the films, or all 4 of the films. So actually, that's one of the few I will come up pretty quickly on.
Cool.
The movie I watched was called Darken, and Darken is essentially about these people who learn about the events of their death. And because they know the events of their death, they are effectively immortal until they reach those events. So, if you knew that you were going to die in a field during the daytime, and we're in a basement right now, you could theoretically jump head first down the stairs and you wouldn't die. You get hurt really badly,
right.
But you wouldn't die because you got to die in that field.
Right. So
it also has him running into this girl who the bad guys are trying to corrupt. And of course, there's a good Darken and there's a bad Darken. And the good Darken...
There's 2 sides to every Darken.
Yeah, is trying to, corrupt this girl, and he's trying to save her. And it's very dark. So Darken is a very appropriate word for it. But I probably need to watch it on a better TV. I've been told there's going to be a release of it coming out to where it's a little bit better visually. But it was interesting. It was not the best film I've seen, but by no means the worst.
Right. All right, so after all that, I took a short little dinner break. I actually had a very, very delightful, tasty dinner at the coffee shop next door. And then I got to watch the main attraction, if you will, for the night, which was 2 major Oscar films, A Star is Born and Vice. And they were both very good films. Vice, I honestly think, for one, your mileage will vary dramatically depending on your politics. I will give you that straight up. If you believe that Dick Cheney was a fine, upstanding individual, then you will hate the film. If you believe that Lynn Cheney was a saint, you will hate the film. If you believe that everything that went, basically that well, you get the point. And actually, there's a focus group that, the director, Adam McKay, likes to toy around with format, if you will. And there's a focus group that they talked to at one point trying to figure out branding and messaging for the candidates, if you will, for the platform. And they bring them back for a post-credits scene that was sort of tongue-in-cheek. And one of them straight says, this was an extraordinarily biased film, or something like that. And he says something about, libtards or whatever, and then the other one makes a comment about the orange Cheeto the guy voted for and all that kind of stuff. And while they're arguing politics, this one girl leans over to the other one and is like, what do you think about the new Fast and Furious movie? It looks lit. And that's the end. I was like, oh man, that's great. That's a great way to end it. This sort of poking fun at yourself. I think the film got a little bit too full of itself with the editing. I don't think it should win the editing Oscar, but the makeup is phenomenal. The acting is phenomenal. Christian Bale and Amy Adams both did a great job. The supporting cast is all very solid. You got Steve Carell as Don Rumsfeld. He does a good job there. Alison Pill as Mary Cheney. She does a great job. One of my very favorite cameos in the entire film, I absolutely love this part, is where you got Dick Cheney, Don Rumsfeld, and a couple other people in a swanky restaurant, and their waiter is played by Alfred Molina. And the items on the menu are basically political action items they're trying to do. And it's, again, if you're liberal, you'll love it. If you're not, you'll hate it. I thought it was a wonderful scene. But that's that one. And then A Star is Born. A Star is Born is really good. I've seen all 4 versions of the film, and I think this is probably my favorite one so far. Bradley Cooper, Lady Gaga, Sam Elliott, all 3 fully deserve their Oscar nominations. There's a lot of other very solid supporting performances in the film. The music is phenomenal. The music is absolutely awesome. There were a lot of original songs. Shallow is not the only original song, and it's probably not the best original song, but it is critical to the plot. But probably the best musical part is a show-stopping number is Lady Gaga belting out La Vie en Rose, which is definitely a cover. So this film is definitely an argument for use of music in film, damn it. But it's very, very, very well done. And one thing is, it gets dark. I'd forgotten how dark the damn story is. Because, I mean, the guy dies in every version, doesn't he? I think he does. I think he dies in every version. And in this one, especially since I have been learning a lot lately and have some family issues involving addiction and substance use.
It's almost a cautionary tale.
It's very much a cautionary tale. I actually brought it up in our last this group I was meeting with because they really it is a cautionary tale about alcoholism, no doubt about it. There's no question about it. But it's just really well done. So definitely check it out if you can. Yeah.
So I've only got one more. How much do you have left on yours? 2. Okay, good. Well, so last one I did, we actually tried watching it, then fell asleep. So I saw the first part, then the last part. And then we tried it again, and we did successfully watch it, which was Alien Covenant.
Ah.
For those familiar with the Alien series,
they do put you to sleep.
A lot of people were saying, of course, and the director's like, well, Prometheus doesn't connect to the aliens. Oh, well, now it does, or it doesn't, or does. And so, it's... but Covenant kind of does that. It bridges the gap between Prometheus and the Alien movies. Matter of fact, it is pretty much a direct sequel to Prometheus, where you have them crash land on this island and run into one of the individuals from Prometheus, and you get to even find out what happened after that. And you get to see the first face huggers and the first actual versions of the aliens. It's kind of creepy and gets you paranoid in the way that those movies tend to get. I was never a big fan of the whole alien, like, bursting out of the stomach type thing. And it's even worse because they have these spores that if the spores touch you, then they... it's pretty hard to watch. But at the same time... it's not a terrible film in the series. It could have been paced a heck of a lot better. The CGI is kind of crappy considering who's behind it.
Yeah.
It just wasn't my thing.
Okay. So, speaking of something that kind of just wasn't my thing, which is kind of weird and unexpected in a lot of ways, the other program that I saw as part of the Environmental Film Festival was Wednesday night. A few nights later, one of the branches of my library system actually did a screening of a film called A Man Named Pearl. And A Man Named Pearl is about a gentleman by the name of Fryer. Oh man, I'm drawing a blank.
Friar Tuck?
No, his last name is Fryer. I want to say Paul, but I'm getting it. But anyway, he's a gentleman, a rather older gentleman from South Carolina. He's a black man in rural South Carolina. So, he decided without any real training, he decided to start topiarying. That's not really a word, but creating topiaries in his yard. And over the years, he has become a tourist destination. He has made his town of, I think it's Bishopsville or whatever, as a tourist destination because of all the topiary work he's done in his yard and for the town and others who ask him to. And he's very skilled. Now, my problem is, I personally feel that is not a particularly environmental way to go about things, and I am baffled that this was included in the festival. I really am. I don't really see the connection to environmentalism unless it's maybe to get people outdoors and excited about being outdoors, which definitely it does that. I give the man props for his skill and his dedication. I definitely do. But I fail to see how this was an environmental film. But it was an interesting one to see, and it was well made, and I had some really good music, and gave me an appreciation for an artisan that I had never heard of before, really. And then the last one I have for something completely different. I finished watching Agretzko, and I watched Agretzko, We Wish You a Metal Christmas.
Lovely show.
And it is. It's a lovely, fun show. Very, very amusing. Very interesting about a cute little red panda office worker who's very sweet and very kind and very giving and very much loves her death metal as a stress release.
And she lives a stressful life.
She does live a stressful life.
But for those of us who have had stressful jobs in life and had to deal with
Yes.
asshole bosses and all that stuff, really and truly, it's probably one of those that
Actually,
holds up quite well.
Her boss would get along perfectly with the boss from Christopher Robin, because they're like all about golf, Yeah, so that's all I have for as far as viewing goes. Did you want to get into the news?
I don't have a lot since we're running pretty long.
Right.
The biggest thing is Samsung has said basically physical media is dead. So they've decided that they will no longer be producing Blu-ray, 4K, or any such players. That they feel it is not economical, as people are now going to only streaming.
It's amazing to hear that from Samsung. That's kind of sad.
So they're kind of doubling down on that. Of course, they're still going to be producing their TVs and stuff because the streaming services are going to be streaming to that. I feel sad for that because it's just that ultra reliance on internet.
Yeah.
And internet's terrible in this country.
Right.
I mean, people think that, we're the United States, we're the top. But because of the system that we have, our internet is crap compared to many countries around the world.
Case in point, one of the news items I had is that Netflix has officially canceled Jessica Jones and the Punisher, which officially gets them out of the Marvel game. But, so not everyone is going streaming.
I wonder if they're going to, because they've released the first 2 seasons.
Right.
Of Daredevil on physical media, and they've released the first season of The Punisher. Yeah. So I wonder if they're going to go ahead and release the rest of them
I think they had all of them on season 1, didn't they? I think they had season 1 of all of them, didn't they?
So I think that, it is possible that they may still try and, because I think they still have the rights to distribute. So they may double down, go ahead and keep those up with what they have, because Disney can't really take what they already have, and double down on it. This might be one of the few cases where Netflix does decide to go with physical media for a little bit. We'll see.
Let's hope they do, because I want all those series.
Daredevil I've heard is really good. Yeah. I've heard Punisher is good.
I've seen
Luke Cage is good.
I've seen a little bit of Daredevil, a very little bit of Iron Fist, and a very little bit of Jessica Jones. But I definitely, I want all these shows. But along, somewhat related to that, which is on the good news front, if Disney does decide to incorporate those characters into their overall theme, Disney did claim within the last couple weeks that they will continue, apparently. They do have plans to continue using Deadpool, and they will still be R-rated. Disney has claimed that they will not try to make him family-friendly, and that they will have additional titles as well that they want to be very careful. And they talked about branding. I'm like, you own Miramax. Just own it.
Well, I mean,
You know?
it's like Predator, I believe,
Yeah.
and Alien, which they own those. You know? And I think they mentioned Alien in that
Right.
one.
So that was I specifically saw Deadpool listed. But yes, Disney does claim that going forward they will have more adult-oriented fare. They'll just have to figure out how to brand it and publish it. And so that could be good news for you Deadpool fans and other similar. Yep.
All right. Well, is that everything? Or...
No, I had a couple more.
All right, go for it.
Okay, one, I wanted to do a shout out. Bruno Ganz, who played Hitler in Downfall, died at 77. He had a lot of roles over the years, but that's probably the one he was best known for, and so I wanted to make sure he get a shout out. An individual who unfortunately has probably people don't want to give him as many shouts out as they used to. Woody Allen has decided to sue Amazon for breach of contract for that multi-picture deal that Amazon signed with him when they knew about the issues. I gotta say, I don't disagree with Woody Allen on this. They knew about these issues, and then they dumped his film and canceled him out of a film. You don't enter into a multi-picture deal with someone who you know is controversial and then try to bitch out halfway through because of that controversy.
Well, yeah, and that's the thing is that they knew about the controversy,
Yeah.
but it hadn't hit the fan yet.
Right.
And, they were thinking, I believe that they were thinking, well, it hasn't hit
Right.
at this point. Why would it hit now?
Right.
Well, yeah, and then it did.
Right.
But yeah, he'll probably win the suit. I don't really see any reason why he won't. Which tells me that we should be at least getting the film that he had finished.
Rainy Day in New York, yeah.
And, he's been saying that is coming.
Yeah.
I don't care what they say, it is coming. And this is probably why. Because I don't think it's as much about the money for him.
Right.
He doesn't need the money. It's about, he wants that film released.
Right.
He's an artist. He is a hardworking artist. Regardless of what you think of him,
Yeah.
he is one of the hardest working people in the field. So,
Or has been, at the very least. And speaking of people who are controversial, one of the big news items in the anime community the last couple weeks, which is very unfortunate, probably more so for you because you love you some English dubs.
oh yeah.
Vic Mignogna has gone from being a star to a has-been.
Well, they fired him. The
Oh,
company did,
yeah. Vic Mignogna, well known as the voice of Edward Elric in Full Metal and tons of other roles. He played Broly, right, in the Dragon Ball?
Possibly.
He is well known throughout the community. He has long been a mainstay of Funimation's English vocal actors, and things have come to light. He has been kicked out of convention after convention. He has been fired from several ongoing gigs. Funimation has straight up dissociated themselves with him. He pretty much, he's done at least for the time being. And apparently he got way too gropey and kissy with fan con-goers. Some of his fellow voice actresses have actually said that he's was a little too friendly with them. Yeah, it's unfortunate. He just... Yeah.
Well, he's a talented man, but again, you should know better, dude.
Yeah. Yeah, especially, I mean, because a lot of people feel like this is like a community. It's people tend to look out for each other, that sort of thing. Like, a lot of people are just straight up feeling betrayed in a way that I think that Hollywood it didn't even quite. Yeah, even the way things are going in Hollywood, I think that it's a different sort of thing. But speaking of Hollywood, my last news thing is a big thing. It's a big thing. The Academy made several dubious calls about this year's telecast, and they've had to backtrack nearly every one of them. And the most recent one, they were all set to televise without on-air presentation in 4 categories: cinematography, editing, live action short, and of course makeup, because we've already established they hate the makeup branch.
Yeah.
Those were going to be edited and re-aired later in the telecast. That is BS. And the Academy finally capitulated. Everyone and their brother went to the Board of Governors basically and said no. And there's a letter with some really, really big names on it that just straight up said, no, this will not stand. So the Academy broke. They caved. And they will now be airing all the awards on air as they should. So, I'll admit I've heard some ideas of doing the shorts as a separate category where people can actually watch all the films and give the awards, and I kind of like that idea. Yeah. But definitely anything that's a major part of the you can't half-ass it. This isn't the Emmys, this isn't the Grammys. You have one show, and it's all, it's not like, the Grammys have become just a concert pretty much, It's so I'm glad the Academy caved on this stupid call. It's stupid that it took them so long to do so. Maybe next year they'll actually come up with some good ideas.
Maybe. Well, we've gone on for, we've been doing this for 2 hours.
Woo!
All right. Well,
this one was for an hour.
Well, yeah. So I hope you all enjoyed this week's vlogcast. We will be back next week with an awards vlogcast. We're going to be mixing that up with some of our watched, because hopefully we won't have as long a list.
Well, yeah. This time we were covering close to 3 weeks, I think.
It should only be a week's worth. So we'll do we might do a 2 for vlogcast again next week, but it'll be a much shorter one, maybe a half hour or so. So, any case, I hope you all enjoyed. Let us know what you think. Yeah. And we will see you on the next one.
Goodbye.
Goodbye. Goodbye.